have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roller with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
It looked great in person, and I just can't wait till next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how do you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast.
And welcome to the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast, powered by Fantasy Pros or Fantasy Points Media Group. That only took me 30 seconds to screw that up. Fantasy Points Media Group, proud to be part of that family here. And we're off to a great start. But you know what? We just keep on moving forward here. 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Tonight, joining us from The Athletic, Jake Ciely. How you doing?
I'm doing better than your start.
Fantastic. First show with Fantasy Points Media Group. And I'm going to repeat Fantasy Points Media Group many times here to try and make up, and maybe people forget about it. You know, sometimes when you get an argument with an idiot, you just let the idiot keep going and eventually you forget what the whole conversation started with. That's kind of where I'm trying to go. In the wise words of Adam Rank, take the long way around, to make a long story longer. That's kind of where I'm going with this. So hopefully if I keep rambling on, people will forget the start, focus on the present, and here we go.
Well, I found out you're Canadian. I'm actually surprised you haven't apologized for it yet. You should have 3 sorries by now.
Well, I thought that was kind of taken for automatically assumed there. The sorry, the A thrown in there a little bit there, but
I wouldn't worry about it, Matt. Look, if Fantasy Points Crew was looking for someone who was going to pronounce every word right and get everything out right the first time, they wouldn't be looking at us to begin with, right? Let's be
Great
honest.
point.
I call it a victory that I actually said Jake's name right, to be honest.
That's right.
I probably still got the last name wrong, but at least I nailed the Jake.
No, you got the last name right. Congratulations.
Perfect. Hey, we're 50-50 so far. That's a victory for me.
What about the episode number? Did you get the episode number yet?
No, I don't even think I announced that. So this is this is episode 74-ish. Now that I'm off my game a little bit. But yeah, you know what? We're doing good. We're on a roll here. And Jake's going to join us here for the next hour and talk a little shop. And here we go. So first thing we got to hit off here, get some housekeeping underway here. I'm going to toss this up here. If you guys are interested in some of the best website fantasy football knowledge out there, head over to fantasypoints.com. Use promo code 21Vipers10 for 10% off any Fantasy Points subscription. That's going to kind of keep rolling around at the bottom there, so you can catch that as you go. Make sure you support the Fantasy Points Media Group as well as Fantasy Points. That's Fantasy Points Media Group. Got that? Fantasy Points Media Group.
That sounds like a great deal to me.
Great job.
I think I've made up for the beginning now already. That said, we know we have to talk about Julio Jones a little bit. So we're going to lead into that right off the get-go. It's probably been talked about over and over and over again. Jake, what's your quick reaction to Julio Jones in Tennessee and kind of your original thoughts, like the first thing that popped into your head?
First thing that popped in my head is net neutral. Is the fact that, he's not going to see the same target volume with Atlanta, but at the same time, he'll see improvement in efficiency. So I'm fine with Julio Jones. I actually tweeted out after, fortunately, I was already starting to run my projections for the draft kit next month. And Julio Jones checked in right at wide receiver 17. But as you guys well know, once you get past that top tier, I mean, there's about a 10-point difference between wide receiver 8 and 24-ish. Right. So if you wanted to say 15, if you wanted to say 20, he's in that group. A.J. Brown, I initially had a wide receiver 4. He dropped to 8. Not a huge difference. I have no concerns about Derrick Henry. We know what's going on we already had Calvin Ridley. I think everybody consensus was top 5, if not top 4, 3 potentially, and he's checked in right there. So I think the big winner is Ryan Tannehill, really. We were kind of all had hesitation of whether or not he could repeat the touchdown success because it's so efficient, but you add Julio Jones to A.J. Brown. The biggest downfall is I'm just crushed because I had so many drafts because I'm sitting here going, I said it on 15 podcasts maybe, and I said, everything the Titans have told us is that Josh Reynolds is the number 2. And then boom, out the window. You might as well. Josh Reynolds actually was inside my top 45. The update dropped him to wide receiver 89, which basically means, forget about it.
So
Yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned.
I'll say I think he still can eat in that offense. There's going to be a lot of like coverage on the outside. He can get some targets up underneath, right?
Maybe 50, 60 for the season.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you brought up Josh Reynolds here, because the one thing I do want to talk about, and you recently released this article, was the top breakout wide receivers of 2021. And I have a feeling Josh Reynolds may have found himself on there as a potential breakout prior to this news. I know Tera was doing her kind of little writing, and she made sure to assume when talking about Russell Gage that Julio Jones was not going to be around for that. But kind of talk about those breakout guys. Don't give us all of it, because we got to go tune into The Athletic to make sure we get all that information. But what do you got on that breakout?
Yeah, Josh Reynolds was number 9. So now he just has a nice strike through, and then the first word is just whelp, and just the rest from there. There's a lot of year 2 guys. I have a ton. Have been trying to trade for a ton of Henry Ruggs and Jalen Reagor. They're both on the list, mostly because miscast as number 1s and playing primarily on the outside, and both these teams have had some adjustments. I think John Brown was one of the most overlooked discount signings that we saw this offseason that should help Ruggs. And of course, we know Philly drafted Devontae Smith. But Judy with a healthy Cortland Sutton also kind of miscast as the number 1 out there. But the top of my list is probably going to be overpriced by the time we get to August. Sorry, Barkley's playing with her pillow right next to me. is CeeDee Lamb. I had CeeDee Lamb a couple weeks ago and said that you could see both he and Amari Cooper finishing as wide receiver 1s. We've seen teammates do it plenty of times. I mean, like the buzz just from the industry is going to be way too high. So I'll just go right back to my number 2, and it's all DJ Chark and Laviska Shenault now with Trevor Lawrence. Love those guys.
That's an interesting combination they got there in Jacksonville. They kind of added, you said Visca's there, and then you got Marvin Jones there. They've got some offensive weapons there in Jacksonville, I think. And you throw in ETN there, James Robinson, quite possibly, depending on how you feel about
You're
that.
leaving one out. Tim Tebow, come on.
Oh, we got to get Tebow in there.
That's the end of the show. Thanks for coming on, Jay.
Isn't my guy there, Tyler Eifert? Isn't he in Jacksonville this year?
No, he's not on the roster anymore, as far as I know.
They already get rid of him?
Yeah.
That's why they brought in Tim Tebow to kick him aside. I saw I'm a Colin Johnson fan. I was actually a little bit disappointed by Marvin Jones coming in, but
exactly.
Colin Johnson, he already mentioned that he might play some tight end. Can we just stop? Let's just admit the fact that you just want to throw out 4 wide receivers. Just that's what you want to do.
Well, Colin Johnson, he's kind of built like one too. He was like 6'6" or something, or I can't remember. I might be making numbers up here, but he's at least 6'4". He's a big guy.
He's
6'6".
Yeah.
So, Jake. So just so you know, we don't do any fact checking here. It's just throwing some numbers. We just kind of go with it and see.
He's 7'3".
Yeah, you can say anything you want.
6'6" and 24 inches.
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
I will say, for the assumption that some people will make, Colin Johnson is not the Devin Funchess, Kelvin Benjamin, though. He's not slow and fat.
That's true.
Well, are we going to see Devin Funchess this year? Because he held out last year, and now, do we even know what's going on with Green Bay? I heard that now Russell Wilson said he wanted to trade, and then all of a sudden he said he didn't want to trade, and Aaron Rodgers wants to trade. You know what? Wouldn't it just make a lot of sense just to, send Aaron Rodgers to Seattle and Russell Wilson to Green Bay and just call it even?
No, because it's not even. Russell Wilson still has probably 7 years left. Aaron Rodgers probably has about 3. If I'm Seattle, I want more. Am I crazy to say that?
No, I don't think so. I think the Bears are the real winner. They were willing to offer up a whole lot of money and a lot of draft picks and all this capital, and they ended up with Justin Fields instead because Seattle felt that they weren't getting enough out of Chicago. I think it was 3 first-round picks was the rumor at one point. So,
well, the draft. What was the suggested draft trade? Is that the Broncos? It was, I think, 3 first-rounders, a second, Chubb and Surtain. Whoa, chill out a little bit there.
Jake, we've been talking a lot about the Jets recently. Who do you see being the breakout receiver for the Jets this year?
He's on the list, Denzel Mims, and I'm not even a Denzel Mims fan. Last year, I thought he was getting way too much hype coming out of college because what I said about Denzel Mims is, okay, we know he's a great deep threat, but if you watch him play, the problem with Denzel Mims is he runs into coverage. So I'm sure you guys know this, everybody watching or listening knows this, is when you stack a corner, you stack a defender, he does the opposite, is he has separation, and instead of just running past a defender or stacking them, it's like the guy's 5 yards deep on him to like backpedaling, and he runs towards the defense. It's baffling. I watched it so much through his film. And I'm not like the best film guy, but if it's that obvious to me, that was my concern about Mims. Obviously that can be corrected. I'd rather work on something like that than somebody who can't run routes at all. But that's why I think he'll be able to be the breakout wide receiver for them, is because also Corey Davis, I think we found out that, myself included, I expected a lot more of him coming out of college. And I have some hesitation in the fact that his success last year came from being a 1B instead of the 1A, and now playing for the Jets and asking to get number one corner attention, being the number one guy, is that he could put up the same numbers but less efficiently, which should open things up for Mims, and whether it's Crowder or Elijah Moore in the slot. I think Mims has some Mike Wallace, those kind of like a Torrey Smith, like that kind of appeal. Might be frustrating in a few weeks throughout the season in fantasy because of the downside of it, but he's clearly the breakout.
Are you concerned at all that he's behind Keenan Cole right now?
I don't believe that.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe that at all. That's for all these, Keelan Coles or whatever stuff, that it's prove yourself for Mims. Mims is in his second year. Keelan Cole's been around. If Denzel Mims loses the job for Keelan Cole, I mean, we just write him off. There's talent wise and what Mims can do. There is no reason starting week one that he should be behind Keelan Cole.
So let's keep it in New York here. You're a Giants fan.
No, I'm a Giants fan on hiatus until Gettleman's fired. Let's make it correct. Let's get it correct.
Okay, yeah.
I'll root for the players, but not for the team.
So,
Nice.
okay, let's talk about those players. We're in that wide receiver kind of field right now. We'll leave Evan Ingram completely out of the equation because, let's face it, we could throw him the ball and he's not going to catch it anyway. But you got Slayton there, you got Tony, you've got Shepard,
Disrespect.
and you've got Kenny Golladay coming there. How is this wide receiver room going to shape out going forward, in your opinion?
I think the biggest beneficiary here is Sterling Shepard. You talk about miscast with the rookies and going into their second year. Sterling Shepard's numbers they're dramatically different when he's playing at the slot versus outside. And, similarly, like you see like Christian Kirk kind of in a place where they can play outside, but that's kind of like, hey, we'll kick you outside 20, 30% of the time just to mix things up, maybe spell a little coverage going into a different direction. And maybe it's just to break something open for the number one. But being the number one, playing outside and playing across from Slayton, and just Slayton had a kind of a downturn. The Giants got more out of Slayton from his rookie season than anybody expected. And I think we all knew there was going to be a little bit of regression as teams kind of like got their book on him, so to speak. I think Golladay honestly helped Shepard the most. My concern for Kenny Golladay is not Kenny Golladay, because what do we know about Golladay? He doesn't separate, but he doesn't need to because he's Kenny Golladay. The problem is Daniel Jones doesn't really show us the confidence throwing guys that are covered. Like Matthew Stafford's throwing to guys who are covered. He knows Kenny Galladay's coming down with that. Daniel Jones already has a hesitation from his own play. And I'm worried that Kenny Golladay already, we were talking about 100 targets, 110 targets and 70 receptions and all those touchdowns. That might be a ceiling there. And I don't even know those touchdowns are going to be there for him. So it really comes down to Shepard. I think Shepard gets that boost being fantasy relevant once again.
Were you excited about the Tony pick?
For next year, because speaking of Shepard, I would put money, if there was a bet in Vegas right now, I would put money on the fact he's not on the team next year, because the Giants can save over $10 million by letting him go next year. Unfortunately for Shepard.
Yeah, they kind of mentioned that Shepard's job wasn't in jeopardy. I think the coach kind of already talked to him. But yeah, we know how that goes. That's all coach talk and stuff like that. Pod kind of steps in here. Do you trust Saquon this year? You feel
100%.
comfortable with him?
100%.
Absolutely. I think he's going to be the running back one this year. I really believe that. I think he's going to outperform Christian McCaffrey. And I like that Giants offense. They have a sneaky good offense, I think, going into this season. So I'm not too worried about that. But Calvin,
I heard that door creak for somebody. Was that Christian McCaffrey walking into the room to come get you? Because
it very well could be. So, Jake, if you don't know, part of the show is behind this curtain here, behind this drop, there's a door. It's basically like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or even those doors that you see on Monsters Inc., where it leads to anywhere. There's kids that come in and out of that back door like you wouldn't believe. There's like 11 or 12 kids in this house. Some might not even be mine. I'm not even sure anymore. But yeah, you'll hear that door going quite a bit. I probably should grease it up, but
maybe some WD-40 in 2 seconds will take care. But hey, I'm with you in the fact that I mentioned this 2 years ago that Saquon Barkley actually had a better points per game than Christian McCaffrey, but that was also before the 100% peak level Christian McCaffrey. I'm still taking McCaffrey. And then the other, so the flip side of it is Saquon Barkley's 2 injuries are kind of freak nature. For anybody that watches baseball, it's kind of like Giancarlo Stanton. It's like Stanton's not an injury-prone player. It's just some really freak, like hitting in the face, the elbow, and stuff like that. If you want to talk about Todd Gurley, like that level of stuff, when you're talking about you don't have ligaments, and that's an injury risk. Nobody expected Barkley to get hurt 2 years in a row. This is the same argument I bring. If you want to, I wouldn't do it. But if you want to take Derrick Henry first, I wouldn't do it. But if you wanted to, I wouldn't complain about it because he's a freak of nature. If he gets hurt, it's going to be a freak injury. It's not going to be because he carried it 370 times last year.
How do you feel about the offensive line?
I don't trust them as much as they trust it. I find it baffling that the Steelers and the Giants both came out of the draft and came out of free agency basically saying, we're good with what we have. I mean, there was like little tweaks, but yeah, it's putting a lot. I mean, Lemieux was one of the worst graded offensive linemen. You have Solder sitting out for an entire year. Maybe that's good at his age. Maybe he comes back 100% now playing on the right-hand side. But Andrew Thomas saw a little bit of improvement late in the season. Some of it they blamed on the coaching staff, which, hey, that could be a thing. Pert was kind of a dice roll, and if he's already ready this year, it's a lot of ifs. It's a lot of if he's ready, if this guy breaks out, if this guy reaches his potential. So I hope their confidence spells true for them. Honestly, all they need to do is top half and just not bottom 5, and everything should gel for them. And then it's all going to be on the shoulders of Daniel Jones, obviously.
Really good talk, and honestly, we could probably ask you questions for the next 45 minutes about football and feel like it was a lot of fun. But also for this show, for those that tune in, they know that that's really not the point of it. We love the football talk, but we are also going to spend time getting to know Jake and getting a chance to hear about your story. And so we always start with the same question, and it gives us a little bit of a peek into your personality. If you were a closer for baseball, you mentioned baseball there. I know you're a baseball fan. I see the Carter behind you. So I guess you're a Mets guy?
Yeah, I'm a Mets guy. I'm back on. See, I was doing the same thing with the Giants until the Wilpons were like new ownership. I was a hiatus on them as well, but now they're gone. Now we have Steve Cohen, so I'm back in on the Mets 100%.
Bingo. Lindor all the way up.
All of them.
If you're the closer for the Mets and you got a song that you're going to come out to, that intro music that's going to get the crowd pumped and introduce you to them perfectly, what song is that?
It's actually easy for me. So because of the timing of it, if you Sabotage by Beastie Boys. So if you wait and that second time through where it drops and then builds back up, and then
just like
as soon as it kicks back in, that's when I bust through the outfield door, and I'm the guy who sprints to the mound. That's who I would. That's exact. I 100% would have that song.
Great pick.
So we're not going to hear any Casey and JoJo a little bit, nothing like that's going to flare up. We're not going to get a little bit of "I will never find another lover sweeter than you, sweeter than you."
No, we'll not. By the way,
another lover. More
after tweeting that, I fell down a YouTube rabbit hole of the best 90s R&B love songs, and I just spent like hours today just listening to different ones.
Awesome.
Well, you know what? That kind of goes. I'm glad you did your research because I understand. I looked at your profile. I did some Twitter stalking and all this other fun stuff that goes with it. And it says not only are you a fantastic baseball and football analyst when it comes to top 5 rankings and stuff, but you kind of rank just about everything, candy and this and that. So let's kind of go into Jake Ciely's top 5 love songs.
Well, I just gave you number 1. I mean, you know that it's definitely Casey and JoJo, and that's people use. Which, by the way, for everybody out there who bring up the close to you, like close to like my mother and brother and stuff, like people, why they think that's weird. For this, like, actually, does anybody in the show know this? Does anybody in the show know who the song was originally written for?
Ooh.
Someone's grandma?
No, nobody
Someone's
knows. See,
grandma.
look, JoJo wrote it for his 7-year-old daughter at the time.
Oh.
So we all turned it into a love song, as in like super romantic love song. But when you understand that context, that section makes a lot more sense than like, because I don't think anybody's ever about here a significant other and been like, man, you're close to me like my brother and my mother and my sister and my mother. Like that just would be weird kind of say.
You have to sing that. It sounds so weird if you say it
I'm not.
singing it.
Trust me. You thought that
Come
was
on,
bad.
Jake.
You don't
Come on.
want to hear me sing. So when God was creating people, and He basically made me and took any ounce of musical talent that could possibly have and gave it to the talented people. Like you don't want me to play an instrument, or you don't want me to sing. You don't want you don't want any of that.
That's why
Trust
he
me.
also made alcohol and karaoke.
I've legitimately never done karaoke in my life, ever.
Wow.
What was the original question, by the way?
We
Well,
don't
I
know.
guess-
Love songs.
I guess the 4 best love songs after All My Life by Casey and JoJo.
Oh, wow. I don't know after that. That's such a tough one to follow. Let's see. Nobody is a good one that I can think of.
Yeah.
What about All for One? What's the name of it?
For
I
one.
swear.
Thank you. I
Yes,
swear is a
wow.
good one.
That is a
You
good
could-
one.
That's Matt's
see-
favorite song. He said that.
I
when he was a kid.
skated
It's
to
funny.
that. I skated
I'm-
and to New Edition. New Edition. That the love song that they had. I'm terrible at remembering names of songs, by the way, if you couldn't tell. All that musical talent also involves remembering the names of musical songs. So.
When you
I've
say
seen
skated
someone-
to that, you mean like at a roller rink? Like
Oh, I mean like couple skate. Yeah, I mean like hold hands
Couple
and
skate?
couple roller. Yeah,
Was
just
that
making
in high
sure.
school? Like what the hell?
yeah, that was high school. That was, but
Should not have
it had been
twang.
out for a few years, obviously, because I'm not that old. I mean, it was actually that'd be kind of weird. I'm in my 20s, couple skating to New Edition.
Nice.
Or it can be really cool. You know.
I've got a fun fact for you guys. When I saw that question, did you guys know that Eddie George's wife is actually a '90s R&B star?
No.
Video
SWV.
vixen or- Oh,
SWV.
Oh.
Oh,
Mhm.
nice.
Wow.
Yep.
How about
Nice
that?
little tie-in.
Rick
Mhm.
Astley never
But Tera,
gonna
can
give
you
you a-
please save us and take us to the next question, please?
I can.
So
I can.
we can go right into the rabbit hole here. We can keep this rabbit hole going. But
The comments just keep popping up.
That is the best question we ever had here.
Yes. But let's take it to sports. So Jake, let's dive into you in sports. Tell us about, the sports that you played growing up. We know your favorite teams. Maybe tell us about your favorite players too.
Yeah, so I started with baseball at a super young age. That's why Gary Carter is number 8 is why I always chose number 8 as much as possible, or 5. That was after with like David Wright, Nomar Garcia Pera, and all those kind of guys. But baseball growing up, the thing is funny was baseball is I actually wanted to be like a GM. I never wanted to be a professional baseball player. I'm the weird one. Like all these kids, I want to grow up and play baseball. It's like, no, I want to grow up and tell you who you're playing for. That's what I want to do. So I played baseball. I played basketball all the way through 10th grade and stopped after 10th grade. I mean, I still played recreationally, but I was the true 3-and-D. I was Trevor Ariza before Trevor Ariza was Trevor Ariza. But when I stopped being able to shoot 3-pointers, that I was done. Because I have very little athletic skill outside of that. But like, so yeah, my career is done there. Played 1 year of football, played safety because I realized real quickly playing football, like I get tunnel vision. Like I could never play quarterback or running back or anything like that. I just get very narrow focus. So I'd play safety, kind of like free safety, so I could just keep my eyes forward. But even that, I was just never that great. But played baseball all the way through college. Could have played at ODU, but I chose not to because I'd be like the 35th. However big the roster is, I would have been the last guy. So I was like, I'm not going to practice 20 hours a week just to have a jersey and sit on the bench and watch the game. And hopefully that we're either winning or losing 20-0 so I can get in on the game. But that was baseball. And then golf. I picked up golf in 10th grade. And so basically playing baseball and golf, because we didn't have a home field for baseball and everything for golf was on the road. My senior year at high school, I was half days almost every single day of the week.
Just
Nice.
to go to the matches.
Yeah, that's because we always have to
Nice.
leave. For baseball, we have to leave by noon, and for golf, you have to leave by 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. So, yeah, never. But Gary Carter actually, rest his soul, he actually signed me a picture because he went to a church of my parents' friends down in Florida, and there was a baseball card either from 88 or 89. It was the one with the wood paneling for everybody that collected baseball cards. He signed it, and it was a blown-up version of it, like a 6x9 or something like that. And that picture that they took is him in front of home plate. Just he hasn't swung yet, but it's the crowd behind him. So it's a very colorful, filled picture. And he's wearing a white jersey. And there was a note inside of it that said, "Sorry, I had nowhere else to sign on this picture," because he signed across his crotch because it was the only place for him to sign where you can see the signature because of everything that was around.
That makes it like more valuable, right? That's the price goes up when that happens.
Yeah, and then I have the note to go with it if I want to. Like get
Yeah.
the selling on eBay. No, I would never sell them on eBay. But yeah, so him. I've met a few people. Met Mike Tomlin here locally because he does the Hampton Roads Youth Foundation. So that was pretty cool. So good times.
Yeah.
D'Angelo Williams, actually friends with D'Angelo Williams. So
Wow.
that's yeah.
You want to pick up all those names you're dropping, bro? Like, what's going
No.
on right now?
That's only like half of them. I mean, you want me to keep going?
Nah, we're good.
Man.
You asked about my sports background.
No way, man. I love to hear about D. Will, man. D. Will's one of those
Yeah.
guys that you hear his story and the stuff that he did and how he basically revolutionized sports in the sense that, when he came in with those pink cleats and the pink gloves, it wasn't allowed then.
Yeah.
He really pushed that forefront of the cancer research, breast cancer, and all the power to him, and did this while being part of Jonathan Taylor, D'Angelo Williams with Carolina, and then going on his own in Pittsburgh and absolutely lighting it up. But I want to kind of circle back to your baseball cards because you have that GM background that you'd rather be a GM than a baseball player. Did you trade cards more so than maybe other children?
No, I was the opposite. I was buy the entire collection thinking about in 20 years what this might be if I had all of them. So
Same.
I didn't trade with anybody. I was the worst person ever. And that's the funny thing is I hate fantasy leagues where people don't trade. I hate it. If there's not at least a couple trades that go throughout the year, I probably won't come back to the league just because it's boring to me. That's why I don't play in more fantasy baseball leagues because fantasy baseball owners just seem boring. They just don't ever want to trade. And it takes half the fun out of it. And I've lost my fair share of trades. The year that Peyton Manning bombed at the very end of the year, I made a keeper league trade and everybody got ticked off about it because I traded for Peyton Manning and then he sucked. I didn't even use him in the championship game because you don't win every single trade. But no, I wasn't just for that reason. It's just because I was always thinking if this ever turns into something, I should probably dig through it at some point since cards are huge again.
Speaking of leagues, like what was your first league? Was it a baseball league or football?
It was baseball.
Okay.
It was the first league was baseball. It was was it Sandbox? I don't remember the site back then.
Yeah,
I was still in high school.
We all have those leagues that we started in. Are you still in the league? What's your favorite league you ever been in?
That's long gone. I'm in only 3 baseball leagues right now, and it's Tout Wars and Labor because they're industry leagues. And then this is a name drop. It's just who runs the league, and then with Michael Fabiano, who used to be, But that's actually my favorite one because it's head-to-head points. I love head-to-head points. So those are the only 3. I don't play in a lot of baseball anymore. I'm mostly football.
So what's your favorite league you ever?
Home league.
Yeah.
Because it's a keeper league, auction keeper. And it's not just the fact that last year, and I'll pull every single year and show you the proof. Last year was the first year I didn't finish top 3. The very first year. I just had a ton of bad luck. But that's part of what it is everybody in the league knows who I am. And I should be. We should be the top of our league if it's a home league. They come to the draft with my rankings. And it pisses me off every single year because they know what I'm thinking. One of my
favorite questions. That's one of my favorite questions to ask analysts and stuff in these home leagues. And we've got guys, it's like, I might not even follow your rankings, but I'm going to bring your rankings anyway, just to show you I have your rankings.
Yes. And it's my auction rankings. It's not even like, hey, I might not even get the next man up because of where I'm picking. It's auction and they know what my valuation is, it's basically like playing poker and I'm holding my hand the opposite direction from everybody else so they can see my cards.
Right. Yeah. So do you want to do the NBA Finals question, Matt? I saw you put that up.
Yeah, I threw that up there. We'd like to mix it up a little bit. Who do you got in the finals here?
I don't care as long. I put an early bet on the Suns at $20 to win about. I think it was like 600 or something. So I just want the Suns to win.
Nice.
I just felt like they're the healthiest and most well-rounded.
And
So
how
you
ugly are
mentioned
those
the-
Knicks jerseys?
The what jerseys?
Those Knicks jerseys that they popped out there, those little black ones.
I didn't even see those. I don't even know what you're talking about.
This is where
Oh,
old
man.
man yells at cloud. Part of the episode happens right here, and
Why are you trying new things?
yeah, exactly.
It's an iconic jersey. Why put it black?
I thought you were talking about the Nets at first.
I think he is talking about the Nets. He made
He-
that-
No, the
Maybe.
Knicks,
Yeah.
the Knicks have they have like
Just
a
had a
practice
senior
uniform that's
moment.
black.
Durant doesn't play for the Knicks, man.
So anyway, getting back to you, Jake. So at some point you mentioned your home league and you mentioned they bring your rankings. Well, at some point you didn't have those rankings and you've got this hobby and you're playing fantasy sports and you realize, okay, like I think I've got something I can add to this community here. Like I'm not just going to be somebody who participates, but I can contribute. Do you remember like kind of feeling that way at one point? And what was that transition like for you?
Well, so there's two transitions. So one was I've actually mentioned this on a couple shows recently because this off-season talk about where did you come from and stuff like that. But shout out to the guy, whoever you are. I hope he finds me one day because I want to thank him. There was a guy in a Giants forum back when forums were still a thing. And I was part of a Giants forum talking Giants stuff every single week. And we would talk fantasy. And because this was my dream, even way back then in high school, I was giving advice. And one week the guy was like, "Hey, why aren't you doing this?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Why am I not doing this?" He's like, "Why aren't you out there giving advice? Like, why aren't you on a site doing this?" And I was like, I guess maybe I should. So I started on Blogspot, my own blog, all in sports on Blogspot. So that was the first, but the second one was after about 2.5 years of doing that. I was like, you know what? I think what I'm doing is, to your point, is too good. Like I think, my knowledge is enough that I should be doing this somewhere where I'm getting more visibility than 13 readers a week or whatever it was on Blogspot, just because I was letting people a Giants forum knowing where my stuff was. So that's when I sent my stuff out by mail, printed out my articles, and did the wrong thing for everybody out there. If you want to try to get hired by a site, don't do what I did. I sent it to the talent. I sent it to Tony Kornheiser and Mike Greenberg and Max Kellerman and like all these people, like, because I was like, I don't know who else to contact, so I'm going to send it to all these guys. And fortunately, I had become friends, quote unquote, and I say friend, we are friends, but like quote unquote friends at that time, doing Tristan Cockcroft's chat on ESPN at lunch while at work every day, talking Chicken Parm and 24, the TV show and stuff like that. So it become like a relationship where he knew who I was. And he and Casey Joyner at the time, who was actually at ESPN at the time, both put me to Scott Engel, who they used to work with. And that's when I got picked up and started actually writing for a site.
Wasn't there like a funny Kornheiser
he yelled at me.
You had?
He yelled at me. I'm sure a lot of people have heard this story by now. Only two people of all the stuff I sent out there. I actually also found that Max Kellerman was gone from ESPN at that time because they sent it back to me. And it was like, does not, like, whatever the thing is like not here or not listed or whatever. And I was like, oh, interesting. But no, two people called me. It was Mike Greenberg and Tony Kornheiser. Mike Greenberg called me first. Super nice, super helpful. So thank you to Mike Greenberg for your help at the time. But Tony Kornheiser called me while at work doing my job. And I answered the phone. He was like, "Is this Jake?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "This is Tony Kornheiser. I got your stuff." So I'm at work. I wasn't expecting Tony Kornheiser to call me while I'm at work. So I'm immediately like, I could feel the sweat like beating up on the back of my neck. So I like rushed to a room to try and get some privacy. And he's like, "What do you want to know?" Like I'm immediately like, he's like kind of treating me like I'm on his show. So I felt like my face get flushed. I felt the blood rush and everything like that. And I was just like, I was just trying to get advice from you, like how to get to your level someday. Like, what do I need to start doing? I don't know. I have to start at the low level. And I was probably stammering halfway through it too. He was like, "If you want to do what I'm going to do, just go do it." And I was just like, okay. And how would I just go do it? Because, mind you, I'm not that old, but this is also before the time of StreamYard and YouTube. Well, YouTube was like in its infancy, I think, at the time. Like, this wasn't just like go pick up and do a podcast if you want to do a podcast. That wasn't a thing back then. And he was like, as I was like, okay, but like, what do you suggest? And he's like, I just started writing for the Washington Post, started sending them my stuff. Like, if you want to be on TV, be on TV. If you want to be on radio, be on radio. It's like, in my mind, I'm like, I'm glad it's so simple. Thank you, Tony.
Right.
Thank you for calling to yell at me and just telling me to just do what I want to do. And everybody I've told that to has told me I should have pushed back. Like, he was probably trying to get me to do like on his show and like push back and fire back a little bit. But at the same time, even if he was, I mean, it's Tony Cornelius. I wasn't prepared to be like, kind of fired up battling with Tony Cornelius. So yeah, I was just like, oh, well, thank you. Thanks for calling me. So yeah, Tony Cornelius, thank you too for calling and yelling at me. Getting my career going, I guess.
But in a sense, that's some pretty good advice. Just go do it, right? If you gotta put yourself out there. So it
works a lot better today now than it does back then.
Right.
So moving on, there's a recent question going around Twitter, and we want to ask it to you. Tell us about a decision that changed the trajectory of your life, and you can't say marriage or birth of a child.
Well, I definitely don't have to say either one of those because neither one of those have happened yet. So that's easy. Failing all of my dates. There's a decision that's affected my entire life. I will say the decision to go to the Athletic is obvious. That might sound for a lot of people, but only because at that time it was a fork in the road because I had 3 opportunities in front of me. And one of them was potentially moving up north for a job. One of them I was trying to apply for the NFL Network at the time, which was the job that Graham Barfield got, for everybody that knows Graham Barfield. So I was applying for that. And then Nando, who I had worked with already, was going to the Athletic, was trying to get me to come over there. And it was one of those, sitting there praying about it all day long and not knowing what to do and asking everybody for their advice. I called Matthew Berry to be like, hey, what do you say? Oh, that wasn't a name drop. I actually I messaged him on Twitter and he gave me his number. I didn't have his number already. So there you go.
For all these names you're dropping.
I just said I didn't have his number until that point. But I asked him like his opinion just because I didn't know what to do. And I sat there for a really long time just debating where it was. And looking back on it, as great as NFL Network might sound, I'm glad the Athletic was the decision of the 3 that I made. It was clearly the one that benefited me the most, and it's a job that I look back and I'm so thankful that it's the one that I went with. It's easily the best decision that I made, career-wise, at least.
And
what's hilarious about Major giving you a hard time about the name drops is he's going to spend all day tomorrow on Clubhouse talking about how he was here with Jake Ciely.
That's not true because nobody name drops me. Come on, be honest.
I'm just giving Major a hard time. So, but I mentioned Clubhouse. That's obviously something new. You mentioned you had to like print out and mail out your newsletters. So you started a long time ago. I don't know when that was, but eventually email came around. In other words, there's been a lot of changes in this industry. So you've walked through a number of things.
Well, I could have emailed, but back then it was impossible to find their email addresses. That was it was easy. It was easier to find where they were located and filming out of, and then mail it to that address care of, than to actually get their email address. Yeah, again, I'm not that. It's not like I'm 50 years old over here. Get off my lawn, kids! I gotta send out this mail.
Last time I assumed somebody's age, I accidentally ended his career, but we won't go into that.
Speaking of Matthew Berry.
Yeah. Right. The challenges, like the different challenges from when you started to the challenges today, like, what do you think about the differences between the fantasy community then versus now?
I would say, I mentioned this to somebody else recently, actually, I'd say today's people in the fantasy industry have, if doing what we're doing right now, have it easier and tougher. And so to what that is back, what you said is like mailing out my stuff is when I was trying to break in, it was go to ESPN, go to Fox Sports, had fantasy at the time, go to NFL. Like you had to go to a big company And even if you went to a big company, you probably had to do it for free. Even if you got into, I did my job for free for 6 or 7 years before I started getting paid. And I did it for 8 before I got paid full time. Wow. So hopefully everybody doesn't have to go through that. But now you can do, like Tony Kornheiser said, if you wanted to go do it, you can now. You can go start your own podcast. You can start your own live stream. You can get on video. You can go to like little websites that are popping up every single year, fantasy-wise, and that are bringing people in and giving them opportunities. The problem where I say it's also harder is because that's a lot more competition, because there are so many people, and there are so many people now easily doing it, where it was so tough back then that you had to find a source to do it for you. So it's the same thing I said on the other show. I'll say on your guys' show, and you guys know this. Find something that differentiates you from everybody else, because everybody can say, go back to what I said about CeeDee Lamb. There's going to be 1,000 people talking about CeeDee Lamb this offseason. Why are you different from the other 999? You got to figure that out, and that's how you succeed in the business.
I love that, because one of the things that Tara is doing on the side, she's got her It's Tara Time, and she's bringing out the John Browns. She's bringing out Jared Goff, people no one wants to talk about, or people that aren't being talked about, players, and bringing kind of that to their attention, rather than how we started off with Julio Jones at the top of the show, because Julio's been talked about on every show, any publication. You've seen Julio, right? So it's a little bit something different. I kind of look back on your tweets here. I think it was sometime back in May. You kind of talked about name dropping a little bit, and we kind of made fun of Major about going on to Clubhouse tomorrow and dropping Jake Ciely's name. But back at an open house back in May, someone recognized you at an open house. What's that feeling like? Like, forget about everything else that's going on, but to be recognized in an open house out of nowhere.
So I've been recognized twice. That was only the second time. And to put it in perspective, I actually went to the Royal Rumble in Arizona with 2 good friends of mine, Chris Welsh and Scott Bogman, and also Mike Wright of the Footballers was with me. And there was us 4. And granted, it was in Arizona where he lives, but walking from the parking lot to the stadium, Mike got stopped 3 times. Stopped by people walking by. And granted, he's a very recognizable person by his look alone. But it's just, we're walking along and like, dang, like that's so cool. Like people walking on the streets recognizing, like, multiple people in one walk. So it wasn't quite to that level of the astonishment of seeing what was happening to Mike, but at the same time, it just was like, even in my hometown of Virginia Beach, which is 1 million people, I think, somewhere around there. But to have somebody be like, "Oh, are you Jake Ciely?" By the way, because I had walked out back. That's what it was. I was like, I walked through the house. I walked through the entire one. And I walked out in the backyard. And I spent a couple minutes looking at the backyard because I was making sure the fence, I didn't put an offer on the place, by the way, but I was making sure the fence was okay for Barkley. So I spent a little bit of time out there. I was out there for a good couple minutes. And I came back in. And he's like, "Hey, you Jake Ciely?" And I thought maybe now, like, the church I go to is a big church. My sister is my agent. So my sister knows a lot of people. Virginia Beach is a small town. Like, I'll bump into people I went to high school with randomly. So I just thought, like, maybe it was somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody. He's like, "Yeah, I follow your fantasy advice. I follow you on Twitter," and stuff like that. I was just like, wow, it's a humbling and cool experience at the same time. Like, it's just like, there are people out there that are just like, "Oh, that's you. That's really cool that I'm bumping into you," in which, 10 years ago, I'm like, "Holy crap, I'm bumping into this guy." So it's weird. It can be both. It can be like really exciting, but also like a humbling, like, wow, like people like me.
Do you have people from like your high school that reach out to you and they're like, "Hey, do you remember me? I got this fantasy draft coming up."
No, interestingly enough. So first of all, the school I went to, we had 32 people in our graduating class.
Wow.
So I went to a private school, very small. We were actually in trailers while I was going to that school. I'm not kidding you. It was a giant gym and then trailers for the classrooms. They spent $70,000 on the basketball floor, but we're going to class in trailers. That tells you where the money was going when I was going there. So only 32 people. I don't keep in contact with much outside of my 2 close friends that I still have friends with to today. Oh, there's a fight going on in the basketball game, by the way.
Oh man.
But no, the only people I do have people that do text me, and I don't hear from them all year long. But it's actually people from like church and stuff like that. And I'm like, dude, like, come on. Like, I see you every Sunday, and like you know, once in a blue moon, we're like, hey, what's up? You know, in passing, and then it's like, hey, what do you think about this? I'm doing a draft right now, and not only that's the worst part about it. It's not even leading up to it. It's I'm doing the draft right
I'm on
now.
the clock.
Yeah, you had 364 days to talk to me.
It's like, hey, Jake, the message was great this Sunday, wasn't it? Yeah, so I'm on the clock right now, and
Like, don't even say hi. Just like, hey, who should I draft right now?
That's
Remember
really
that
what it's
part
like.
of the sermon where Jesus said, "Love one another"? I got a question for you.
My answer to that part of the sermon is I don't. That's why people don't like me. I don't love everybody. To be honest.
Oh man. Let's get back on track a little bit here. Jake, so can you talk to us about some of your more memorable podcasts or interviews?
Yeah. Am I allowed to name drop when you ask me that?
Yeah.
I've actually got some names written down. So
I'm keeping score right now. So
Yeah, you keeping score right now?
Jake, there's one name that I think you could drop in this interview that'll just blow Major's mind here completely.
I don't know. I already mentioned. We'll say. You tell me because there's only 3.
Fan.
He's what?
He is a 49ers fan.
Oh, 49ers fan. I don't know. You might have to help me with that. So, the three that come to mind is D'Angelo Williams, because I had him on and he was talking about my dating life and made some terrible analogies, and because it was just about how miserable my dating life has been, and it's people.
That sounds like a show in itself.
Yeah, that's really what it was, honestly. But just being able to be like, hey, I have a player on. I've had a few players, but most other outside of D'Angelo, they were all like, we're talking to this person because they want to do something with the Athletic or this person, whatever, that type of stuff. So the 2 that I had on my podcast have nothing to do with sports. One was, if anybody's ever watched the pitch meetings on YouTube, hilarious. Ryan George, Canadian, by the way. Everybody should check him out. The Ryan George. He does pitch meetings. He takes movies and points out everything that's laughably wrong with them, but he does it as he plays both parts. He's the guy with the script pitching it to the guy on the movie side of things. Hilarious. There's over 100 of them out there. I recommend everybody watching them. So that was a really fun podcast. And then my all-time favorite one was actually the creator of Final Space, Olin Rogers. If everybody's never seen Final Space, go watch it. It's a terrific show. It looks like he even said this on the podcast. It looks like a Futurama ripoff, but it's better than that. Like, there's more drama and character development and just like good love story involved. Like, it's just great show. And he is hilarious. Like, you should watch some of his YouTube videos too. But that was just cool because that one was just, I didn't watch, like, I watched him on YouTube basically before people kind of knew about him. And then he got the show Final Space. And that was really when he broke out and became famous. But it was just kind of like, even though he was becoming famous when I reached out to him, he still took that. He's like, yeah, I'll come on. I have 1 million followers, but I'll still come on your podcast and just hang out for an hour and just talk about my life. So it was really fun. And we're still in communication. If there's a season 4 of Final Space, he said I'm allowed to voice a character. And so I am hoping for a season 4 of Final Space.
That's awesome.
So who was your first ever interview?
Oh, that's where you're going.
That's where I'm going on this one. I'm not talking about like something going on in the deli here or anything. I want the real goods.
You want my worst interview ever? That's what you're asking for. You're asking for somebody who I still hate to this day, and that's Joe Montana.
What?
Joe?
What?
Joe Montana. I'm like, hey, if Joe Montana ever watches your show, first of all, kudos to you guys. But if Joe Montana ever sees this or hear this, I want you to know, Joe, I still hold a grudge against you. You're a complete jerk to me, and I hate you for it. So
I was working soundbite for the recap, by the way. That's right there.
That's right there. So we had a local radio station here. This is actually, by the way, this is also where the All In Kid nickname came from. So there was a local radio station, Mike Powers, Bob France, Bob Fresh is what his name was on the radio. It was Alternative Rock 96X. I became friends with them because I interned for the radio station, and I became friends because we liked a lot of the same sports teams and we played poker, and I had never really played poker in person. So the first time we ever played in person in a tournament, when you first start playing Texas Hold'em, you're like, oh, I don't care if I'm bluffing or not. I'm going all in. Like, that's the best move. Go all in. So I did it a whole bunch that day, and another guy with the nickname Don Ho-Hos actually went, damn, All In Kid. And that's where All In Kid came from, and that's where it stuck. But the same thing was Mike, Bob, and I were able to, we started a sports show on the AM side. Only lasted 6 months because they really mishandled the sports transition. They still had half shows like wine tasting shows and stock shows mixed in, interspersed with sports shows. So you never knew what you were turning into at what time of the day. But in any case, at the end, when it was about a month left and we already knew the show was going out, they could kind of like checked out mentally. They didn't even do the final week of the show. I did the final week of my show by myself, which, by the way, Colin Cowherd and the rest of you people who do a show by yourself and don't talk to anybody else, all the credit in the world. That is the toughest thing I've ever done, is trying to talk by yourself and nobody else on a podcast. Well, that was actually a radio show. But anyway, Joe Montana's representatives called and said, hey, do you want to interview him? He's in town promoting his benefit foundation, whatever it was. And I was like, hell yeah. And they both didn't care. And they're like, yeah, you can do it. We don't care. The show's not even going to be around anymore anyway. So I went, and nervous as hell. I mean, it's my first ever person interview. It's my first ever player interview. It's my first ever sitting down live in front of a person interview. And it's with Joe effing Montana. Like, of all people, one of the greatest football players of all time is my first interview. So I'm nervous as heck. I write down every single question, try to memorize them so I'm not shaking and nervous. And I know I was shaking when I got there. I know he knows I was nervous, and that's why I'm pissed off about it. So I tried to break the tension for myself. And what do you do as a speaker? What do they always tell you? Open with a joke, or, get that relaxation going. So it wasn't a complete joke. It was just, hey, there's no nickname for Joe Montana. He doesn't have a nickname. So my first question was, we don't have a nickname for you. Nobody's ever called you anything. I was like, there had to be something in high school, like, or maybe your parents even called you something. It's like, what's the nickname? Tell us, what's your nickname that you've never told anybody before? And just looks at me and goes, nope. That's that. And what I just did, dead silence, staring at me.
Dead air.
Didn't
Wow.
continue, didn't try to laugh it off, didn't try to move into something else, just sat there, dead silence, waiting for me to ask the second question. I blacked out. I don't remember the rest of the interview. I have no idea if I asked the right questions. I don't even know if I made sense. Because basically after that point, my blood went everywhere else, and I have no idea what happened with the rest of the interview. I still have it on tape somewhere. I still have never listened to it to this day because I'm terrified of how bad it sounds.
Wow, man, that sucks.
So that's why.
I don't like Joe Montana anymore.
Thank you. Joe Montana's a jerk. Tom Brady's the GOAT, Joe, not you. Suck it up.
That's awesome.
All right. So if you were, so let's say that there was no Giants message board, and there was no Tony Kornheiser Sage Wisdom phone call, and there was no fantasy football for you, what else would you be doing?
Well, so I went to college for marketing and e-commerce minor, because it was the least boring thing in the world to me, and it was still kind of boring. So I left college and worked at Geico briefly, and then I was the internet marketing manager for a company called Lillian Vernon. I'd probably be doing like a marketing manager type position somewhere, and like half enjoying life. Like I say half just because it was similar to college. It was the least boring, real job that there was. But it still wasn't. I mean, I opened a deli and that completely failed. That actually went bankrupt in 2 years, unfortunately. Something else I thought I wanted to do. And it's a good thing, too. My dad and I were talking about this past year and saying, I can't imagine. So when it went bankrupt was 2015, which if you put out the timeline when we opened in 2013, 2019, 20, if it was successful, probably is about the time where you start thinking about opening a second one. Mm-hmm. And if we opened a second one right as COVID hit, I mean, now it would have been closing 2 places because there's a lot of places around, like local shops. A lot of them suffered. So it's hindsight. It's like, okay, it's a good thing. I didn't want to lose all that money, but it is what happens. But so probably just doing marketing and kind of just being like, yeah, and everyday man, and kind of just being out there doing a normal job.
See, I thought maybe that I like to creep through Twitter a little bit every once in a while because that's how I roll. I thought maybe you'd be like working for Disney or something, maybe setting the parental guidance on things, like maybe giving Hercules or Shrek a different kind of rating. Do we want to go into detail a little bit about the beef with
Hercules? About how sexually suggestive that movie is, and that nobody talks about that?
Really?
Did you never see
it? We've all seen Shrek, and it's pretty blatant. Like it's pretty quick. You're like, okay, yeah, okay. That's probably not for kids.
Right.
Hercules, no one talks about it. You're right. I agree with you 100%. Every little innuendo in Hercules, it just like it passes. No one mentions it.
Because I recently saw some of it, and it's like the scene that when I tuned in was the one where he first rescues Meg, and she's cleaning up in the water, and she's literally bent over, and it's showing the backside shot, and he's like, all right, and then she's being flirtatious with it, and they say some innuendos in a kid's damn movie. They say innuendos. It's just stuff, and that was that's what spurred the thought process about what you're talking about with the tweet. I said, which is the most sexually suggestive that maybe kids aren't catching? And it was Hercules, Toy Story series, and Shrek, because Toy Story's got a few too that people don't even realize when you go back and look at it. But yeah, it is, and throughout that entire movie, there's a lot of it that was a very, very, I don't know if it would pass. If it was released today, I don't know if it would make it through the cancel culture that's out there right now.
Yeah. What have you learned through fantasy sports? I know you got a lot of things going on with athletic and looking at Disney movies and finding into windows and everything. What else do you have? What have you learned through fantasy sports?
Like as in working in the business?
Yes, sir.
I would say to go similar to my point from before about, find something that makes you different. Because what I've learned about this industry it's twofold. One is there's a million people saying the same thing, and you can get drowned out by crowd noise, so to speak, because everybody is out there trying to do the same thing. And I go listen to other shows to be like, oh, there's always new people like you guys. I didn't know who you guys were a year ago. But you listen to stuff and you're like, isn't interesting. And I hate to say this, but this should be the lesson for everybody out there. I've listened to stuff and be like, after 10 minutes, it's like, I can't do any more of this. Like, I can't. And I don't want to be the guy to reach out and be like, here's my 2 cents. You don't even know I was listening to your show. You need to do better. But again, you need to find something that makes you different than everybody else, but also at the same time, where I'll say with that is decide, kind of like similar to I do. Hopefully don't go 6-8 years without getting paid, but don't half-ass this industry. This industry will eat you alive, and you'll be gone in 6 months if you try to half-ass it. I will say that just because, again, to go back, there's so many people out there that are busting their tail and trying to find their different voice and trying to do it differently, that if you're out there and you kind of just want to be like, I found these 5 stats on PFF, and you have zero context or know even half what you're talking about, people are going to know. People are going to know if you didn't put the 100% behind it.
Yeah, I like that, because that sounds like you listened to Matthew McConaughey's video today too, talking about half-assing. No. He threw that out there. Oh, he did something about half-assing it too. He threw that out there. But I like.
What, he just go all right?
Pretty much, yeah.
That's perfect. That's
it was basically I keep getting older, but everyone keeps half-assing it the same. So it was kind of one of those type of things.
That's pretty good.
Nice. So we're gonna, for the next question, we're gonna put Major on timeout for a second so that you can name drop, because that's what this is about. I think it's like pick on Major Day, but let's go.
It's all good.
Relationships. Tell us about some of, maybe, 1, 2, 3 of those most important relationships that you've had within the industry.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you went that direction. I thought you were trying to bring up my dating life. I was like, are you really going down this road?
If you got the names to drop there too, but let's go ahead and hear that.
No.
It is Thursday, right?
That's what right.
Troy says. It's Thursday.
Oh, yeah, it is. I didn't even realize. I keep forgetting it's Thursday. There you go. I mean, that's part of this industry too. It's just the days don't even mean anything anymore. You know what? The thing is, I mentioned his name before, is Nando DeFino's number 1 on the list. I will recommend everybody out there that if you can make a connection, that's the one thing I didn't say that too. It's a Major. I know you're on timeout, but to your question as well, just kind of circles back to it, is make connections, because it's kind of almost sucky to say this, but I've seen people who get jobs where other people are doing a hell of a lot more just because of the connection they have. Just understand that's part of the industry. It's like Hollywood. You know, you might see a great actor in some no-name movie, but because they knew a director from somewhere else, that's the guy that they bring in. Something like J.J. Abrams loves to recycle his actors. We know that. And that type of stuff. But that's why I say make the connections. And if there's one guy out there, like I will say, see, there you go. Nando DeFino. He's the guy. He's the one that's the cliche life of the party, always smiling, always having a good time. If you get on his bad side and there's very few people on it, there's something wrong with you. And that's why I say that. There's something wrong with you if Nando doesn't like you, because he likes everybody. And he's made so many connections for myself and a lot of people I've worked with through the years just alone, because he's one that always is looking out for somebody else. Like he'll see, like if you guys tomorrow were posting a job, he would probably, and he saw it and knew somebody, he'd be like, hey, you should check out whatever, even if he's never talked to you before, because he's always looking out for people to get that next one. So Nando is number one at the top of the list. Matthew Berry, I will include, because Matthew Berry at this point, especially of his career, over $1 million, he doesn't have to take time out of his day to talk to me if he doesn't want to. And I wouldn't fault him for that. And that's why I say that. Like if I sent him a DM and if he never responded, I would have been like, I would have been like a little bit upset that he didn't, but I would have never been like, screw him. It's just, Matthew Berry doesn't have to anymore. And he still does. And that means something. So those would be the top two. And then Bob Harris is a great one. Bob Harris, I always love him. Scott Angle, I'll say this, Scott Angle will always have my back 100%. He's already, because you have to have 10 years before you can be elected to the pro football or pro, whatever the FSWA, Fantasy Sports Writers Association, whatever the one is, the one where they do the awards every single year. That's the right one, right? FSWA, do you guys? Yeah. You have to be in the industry for 10 years before you can get nominated for the Hall of Fame. And he's already trying to nominate me for the Hall of Fame. Like, dude, I'm only on year 11. Like chill out. I appreciate it. But so those would be my top four. And definitely Nando and Matthew Berry are, they're always looking out for people, even though they don't need to. Bob calls them bald. Bob calls everybody bald because he is bald. He just wants other people. He just wants other people to join him.
Well, you see the intro video. Bob's like, it must be bald guy day. Rank was on earlier.
Yeah, that was on there.
Right on
Rank's
the intro,
a good guy too. I hung out with him in Vegas for a little while. He's super friendly. He's into wrestling and Star Wars like I am. So he's another good one. Fabiano's a good one. He actually helped me when I was trying to decide between the jobs too, honestly. And he's another one that doesn't have to take out of his time. 1 million followers at this point of his career.
Right. I love those names that you mentioned. We got Nando coming on in August. He's been gracious enough to jump on our show. I'm looking forward to that. We've had pretty much the whole CBS crew. I was like, Dave, who do we need to get on our
love
show?
Jamie.
He goes, you got to get Nando. I'm like, all right, it's done. So I got in touch with him. He's going to jump on the show. Matthew Berry, he said he doesn't have to do this stuff. We recently did a show for how we can make a difference for the blind community in fantasy football. I kind of dropped it into his DMs, and he retweeted it shortly after. All of a sudden, our numbers just went right through the roof because it was a huge cost. And that's the Berry bump that we talk about. Yeah. But I want to ask you about another member, Calvin Major Tera Stepinks. I might have the name wrong. Mike Clay. Was there you guys went down to a conference or something, one of your first conferences together, and you guys kind of interacted a little bit? Was that Mike Clay? And then his wife, you met his wife too?
No, I haven't met Mike Clay's wife. So whose wife are you thinking of then? Now I'm interested.
No, wasn't
you guys? It was a show there. You're like, yeah, the wife, and you like met the wife. It was someone I can't remember now. I'm drawing a blank.
Who was it? Oh,
I'm trying to think of wives that I've met. Honestly, I have met Mike Clay several times. Like I was trying to. Mike Clay was at the combine. I was having a brain fart there. That was actually the combine, and we got lunch the one day, and I did my write-up about the first experience at the NFL Combine where we saw what we thought was a dead body in Indianapolis. That was interesting. It was actually Clay, Barry, and I were walking to the Steak and Shake. That's the burger place, right?
Shake Shack?
Not Shake Shack. The steak, the one that's got steak in the name. I think it's Steak and Shake.
Steak and Shake, yeah.
Yeah, Steak and Shake. And we're walking by, and there was just a dude laying on the sidewalk and some paramedics around him. And the reason we think he wasn't alive is because the paramedics weren't doing anything. They were just standing there. They were standing there waiting for something. So we were just kind of like, yeah, we don't think he's dead, for this world at this point. And the weirdest, I felt weird getting food because it was right outside the Steak and Shake. And we got a booth and sat down and started eating. and it's 2 windows behind us right outside. And I just like, it felt weird that was like over my shoulder. I was trying to tell that story and also give you time to figure out who you were talking about. By the way, I was trying to help you out there.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. I tried to look it up. My gut says it's Mike Clay somehow, or I can't remember. Either way.
I don't think it was, but
because I haven't met his wife.
It had to do with like a draft board.
Yeah, it was somebody at a conference that brought their wife, and she ran the draft board. But I
don't. Mike Tagliere?
And she kind of told
yes,
you, like,
Tagliere?
Mike Tagliere. All right. So what's the question behind Mike Tagliere?
It was just about the relationships are important. Were you pretty new to the fantasy industry at that conference or something like that? You kind of
that wasn't even a conference. That was the flex leagues, which that's what I was gonna. I'm glad you kind of did that, because you said the CBS guys, and I'd be remiss if I didn't include Jamie Eisenberg in that list of people that are great in the industry. Another one that shouldn't have to take any of his time. I mean, at the NFL Combine, he's on the panel for CBS on live TV interviewing players, so he doesn't need to spend time, but he does, and he's a great one too. If you ever meet Jamie in person, just so you know, though, he speaks really fast and quickly and abrupt, and it almost sounds like he's being rude if you don't know at first, but he's not. That's just how he speaks. For everybody out there, he's a super nice guy. The flex leagues is what you're talking about. That actually started because when I first started in this industry, one of the first things I ever said to Scott Angle when I started writing was, we have tout and labor for baseball, which are the expert leagues. I hate expert industry leagues. Let's call them that. And it's, the best of the best, and you have to be invited, and there's a waiting list and all this type of stuff. And I said, the very first thing is like, why are we not doing this for football? Like, why is there no industry football big leagues? Because this is even before Scott Fishbowl was even a thing. It's like, why are these out there? And he's like, I don't know. Nobody's ever done them. So after about 2 or 3 years of asking about that, I was also working for football.com as a side hustle at the time too. So I was working for 2 different sites and a full-time job. If people out there want to see what it takes to get in this industry, there you go. Football.com, which is the best URL ever, run by the biggest idiots ever, because nobody goes there for NFL football. You have your URL is football.com.
How did you mess this up?
It's like, you don't get any better than that. But I was over there doing fantasy, and what I did at the time is I pulled a consensus of industry people before your accidental name drop at the beginning of Fantasy Pros was even a thing. This is before they even did their thing. Is I found a bunch of people in the industry. I was like, hey, send me your top 100. I'm going to combine them into a consensus, and I'm going to send them back to you guys, and we're going to release these 20 at a time. And then I want you to say one overrated or underrated, or somebody you really like that's perfectly priced, something like that. So it was 5 weeks of releasing 20 players all the way up to number 1. And at the end of it, Jamie Eisenberg was like, hey, you guys, he's like, why don't you do a draft with all these guys? And I was like, oh, yeah, like, I've been trying to do that forever. And he actually helped me get Flex started because he had way more connections than I did. So that's what it was. That's the first time I ever met Mike Tagliere. And we were live on Sirius XM at their studio in DC. And we got there, and one of the people who were just going to show up and hang out and do the draft board for us so we could actually see what we were drafting didn't end up coming. And so that's where Tagliere's wife was like, oh, I'll do it. So yeah, we actually had his wife who was willing to, just tag along and do the draft board for us. But yeah, that was the first time I ever met Mike. That's the first time I met a lot of people in person. That was the whole reason behind Flex too, is not just be like, oh, this is an industry league, I beat everybody in the industry. It's, I've never met you guys in person. I've never met half the people I've talked to this year on podcast in person. And it's just to get together once a year and actually hang out just for a day and draft together and then go out for drinks and food afterwards. And so really about to go back to the relationship is build the relationships. I know people who've made connections through Flex. I'm not being like, oh, look at me at Flex, but people have made connections and jobs and opportunities because of that, because it's what you're talking about. It's just the relationships out there.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because I got lucky enough and fortunate enough that Bob Long hit me up to represent the Dawson division for Canada in the Kings Classic. And a lot of the individuals that you see on this show have come through the Kings Classic, kind of that connection, that networking. And God willing, if the borders are open, I'm coming down. Even though I'm in the international division, I will sit in the corner by myself while everyone's going on, because I want to see all these industry guys get together, guys and gals get together and do an auction draft. I can just imagine the insanity that's going to follow with that kind of thing.
Oh, that gets that's a lot of fun. We've done that with Flex. It's It's very interesting to see an auction go on, because then you even get I'm the type of person that I even say you hear it in my voice, and like when you start to aggravate me, stop bidding me up, like enough, go away. I'm just like 41, stop.
So Jake, what do you have in store for the rest of the off season?
So fortunately, I'm taking a little bit of a breather because I just finished I've been doing this for 3 years with the Athletic, but a couple of years in general as my breakout candidates for all 4 positions. Award nominated, never award winning. So, but at least it's been nominated. Just finished up with the robust tight ends, the 5 breakout tight ends, which you're all waiting for, and everybody's super excited for that. But our draft kit drops in July, so there's a little bit of a break. I'm going to be doing a football mailbag, but I'm working on the draft kit coming out. As I mentioned, I was already working on the projections to get those ready and going, but I still have the fantasy baseball mailbag at the Athletic because I still have to do a little bit of baseball, because that's actually, I kind of got known for baseball before I got known for football, even though I do more and have always done more and do better with football. But the accuracy is what got me for baseball. What really happened was and not to toot my own horn or whatever, I finished number 1 back-to-back years in accuracy for baseball. And so that kind of like put my name out there for that, even though I am more for football. So that's coming out. And then, like I said, the draft kit's coming out for July, which is, the breakouts are one of my favorite, but one of the articles in the draft kit that's always my favorite is last year's trash, because people make the mistake of being burned and then burying that person and never wanting to go back to them again. So that's where you find a ton of value. I love those guys every single year.
Man, you've been dropping some great advice already throughout this show, especially like showing your hustle, having a full-time job and working for 2 different websites all at the same time. But can you give us some advice for those of us trying to make it in the industry?
Yes. So Tony Kornheiser, just go do it. Go do it. You want to be on TV, go do it. You want to be on ESPN, go do it. Just go out there.
The old guy yelling at people. The circle of life.
Yeah, exactly. Get the hell off my lawn and go do it. No, I will say the biggest things, it's been, as you mentioned, it's been said, but to underscore the 2 biggest ones is, yes, just go do it, because now you can so much easier. But the 2 ones that go with that is, like I said, is find your voice, find what's going to make you different. Whether, it doesn't have to even be sports different. Like if you want to be a stats guy, be a stats guy. If you want to be a film guy, be a film guy. Like whatever you want to do. If you want to be tight ends only because you feel like that's your niche, like do it, or figure out what makes you different than everybody else. But also, it's not just the hustle from the work side of it. It's make those connections. I can't tell you how many, please make those connections. My Twitter, like the following I have, which isn't even like that, it's because, you got to toe the line, and I don't really have to give advice on this part, but there's toeing a line between jumping in conversations of people you follow to try and get you noticed, but not be obnoxious about it. And that's the thing, is like, because people will respond to you eventually. Like if you're in a conversation with 2 people I'm talking with, and then you kind of jump in and throw something interesting out, I'll say, don't jump in the conversation, immediately start an argument. But you could it could be like, hey, I was looking at this and I found this. And then, if I'm talking to Rich Rebar and he's like, oh yeah, that makes good sense. And then all of a sudden the people that follow us see you, and then you potentially get some followers from that. And then also because you interacted with us, when Nando comes to somebody on my level, which is way below Nando, he even says like, hey, we're looking for somebody like this. You have any names? I could be like, oh, I talked to you guys. I talked to Tera, Calvin, Major, and Rat. I talked to, like whatever. Like it's just the connections are going to mean so much to you.
Well, Jake, all I got to say about that is I like it. I like it a lot.
I like it a lot. They need to make a Funko of him on one of his movies. Just one of them.
Last question. Do you have any nicknames you've never told anybody about?
I laugh too much. Hold on. Nope. I do have one. Do you want it? It's awful. You're never allowed to use this. You're never, ever allowed to. I mean, the obvious one was Ciely Posturepedic, but the mocking one that I got for the bullies in high school, quote unquote, if you want to call them that, this is the worst one. Hey, this is kudos to you guys. I have never told anybody this. I legitimately, this is the question you just asked. I've legitimately never told anybody this. So there you go. Hate it to this day. So don't ever call me this. But in high school is called Ciely.
Why? It just rhymes.
Just because
with
it
the
just
name.
It just sounds so disparaging.
Or with your name.
Yeah. And then Nando calls me Jakey because if you've ever seen Not Another Teen Movie, there's one specific line out of the entire damn movie, where he's talking about something, and the tough guy in that movie says to Captain America, who, by the way, played the main role in that movie, he looks at Chris and he goes, Jakey, about to make a big mistakey. And Nando's called me Jakey for my entire life.
That sounded like Nando when you said that.
Did I?
Yeah.
Adam Ronas can do a spot-on Nando impersonation, by the way.
The greatest moment in podcast history was he went on like just a tirade of 4-letter words that Adam had to beep out of the podcast just to make Adam mad. That was the greatest moment. I love that.
They're always great together.
Yep. So I think this went even overtime. I appreciate you staying. Like this was a really, I had a lot of fun. Hope you had a lot of fun.
So much fun, man.
Just want to give everybody an opportunity. We mentioned Tera. Tell everybody a little bit about the YouTube videos that you have dropping.
Yeah, if you guys, obviously subscribe to Dynasty Vipers. My videos are under there. It's Tera Time, same as my username. But yeah, they're just 30 players in 30 days, quick, 2 to 3 minute videos talking about players that you can add for adding depth to your Dynasty roster or things that might be a little riskier. So a lot of players that maybe you haven't thought of adding, or you might think that might not be someone that adds value, but yeah, go check it out.
Major, how about you? Other than, I know you're shopping for a green screen this week, which is exciting. What else?
I mean, I don't do anything. I'll be name dropping Jake on Clubhouse. Catch me on Clubhouse.
Oh, I met Michael Vick too.
Oh, nice. We can get some brooms for this guy. Clean up on aisle 5. It's all good. It's all good. I'll be name dropping Jake on Clubhouse. Catch me there. I guess back to you, Matt.
Yeah, Matt. Last word.
Last word. Well, Jake, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. And I just want to leave our audience with this. All those single ladies that are watching the show, slide into Jake's DMs. You know what? If you want some Jake slow jams, he's got all the love songs coming for you. He's been thinking about all these songs all his life. It's not the end of the road, and it's all for one. And with that said, this is Dynasty Vipers ViperCast. Make sure you check out the Fantasy Points Media Group. Head over to the fantasypoints.com. 21 Vipers 10% off. I nailed it this time. Fantastic. And we're out of here.